For project one, you're going to create a self-portrait that doesn't use any photos of yourself or even any photos of your family or any illustrations or any comic drawings of yourself. Nothing like that. The idea here is to create a composition that represents you through the images that you choose to use in it, the colors that you use, the lines and textures and the mood, and the title. This example that we're looking at covers all the requirements for this project without being too complicated in the way that it was constructed. There's some very specific technical requirements, so you're going to want to find the rubric, which I'll show you in a moment, and download and print it out and refer to that while you're working on the project. If you follow that, you'll score really well. So what do I mean about not being overly complicated? The idea in this project is to use layer blend modes and layer opacities to take different types of images and create a new composition from it. So if we look over here in the layers panel, we'll see that there are 5 images that make up this composition. This image of the flower has the background removed. You're not required to do that. You may want to do that, but you're not required to. I see a lot of students who spend hours and hours trying to remove backgrounds and composite images together to make something look realistic, and you don't have the skills for that yet. It's not expected in this project. Instead, you can create something completely unique and interesting to look at by using these layer blend modes. So even this flower has a layer blend mode. If I select it in the layer panel, we'll see that it's only at an opacity of 43%, so we can see through to what's happening below. And then these other layers are blended using different blend modes. This one's using color burn. Let's look at the one below. This one's on normal, but it's at an opacity of 57%, and this one's using luminosity. So my recommendation is play with these layer blend modes and see what you might just accidentally discover and go with that. If we take a close look at the layers panel here, we'll see that there's a couple groups. All of the photos have been put in this group that looks like a folder, and then there's a group here for the text. You're required to use text in this project. That's going to be your title. So this is Botanical Nights, and she used 2 different fonts for this. So that's an idea that you might want to use. The biggest challenge with the title for most students is you want to incorporate it into your composition, not just stick it on like a title that's rubber stamped. So think about fonts, think about colors, think about effects that are applied to it. So the text for this one has a really nice effect where we can see through the letters with just a stroke around it, and it works really well with the theme and with the colors. You're also required to use some color adjustment layers. 2 of them are required. And so this project uses hue, saturation, and brightness and contrast. And the last element in this that's required is a gradient. So if you look at the layers panel, you can see it's really not that complicated, but all of the requirements have been met in the project. There are other technical requirements that I'm not going to be able to see by just looking at your file, so you'll need to write about that in the written part. Those would be things like cloning, retouching tools, using the history panel. Some things aren't stored here, so if you write about it, I can give you credit for it. This is the rubric for Project 1. You'll find a rubric for each of the projects this semester. The rubric is like having the answer key. It gives you very specific directions as to what's required and shows you how many points each of those will gain you. So make sure to maybe print this out and have it sitting at your desk while you're working on the project. Some of the things that are required in here, you might forget about how you applied them. So it's also a good idea to take notes as you work, and that'll make it a lot easier to do the write-up portion, which I'll show you next. Each of your projects require a write-up artist statement. that's 1,000-word minimum, which is about 2 pages long. I provided some student examples for you so you can get an idea of how to format yours. The idea is to write about the creative process and then describe all of the different technical requirements and how you use them in your project. I've provided a Word template for this. You can turn this write-up in as a Word file or a PDF. I don't have pages, so if you have pages, you'll need to save it as a PDF. So click on this link here to download the Word document and then write your write-up on that file. You get a point just for following the directions for that. Right now I'm looking at the module for Project 1. So when you go through the Project 1 module, which you've started with this video, you'll get to this page. And right after this, I've provided some ideas for you to write about in the creative part of your write-up. These are things to be thinking about. You can describe who you are, what's important to you, how do others see you. So you don't have to follow this as like a specific guideline. You don't have to bullet out and answer these questions. I just wanted to give you some ideas of things that you can talk about in your write-up. Some students struggle to meet the 2-page minimum, but if you address all of these things, or even half of them, and you address every technical requirement in the project, you for sure will have written at least 1,000 words. When it's time to turn in your project, you'll come to the Project 1 Self-Portrait Assignment page on Canvas, and you'll see this blue button in the upper right-hand corner that says Submit Assignment. You're going to use that to submit the write-up, not the Photoshop file. The Photoshop file will be turned in using an FTP server. Photoshop files can become very large, and we could just bloat this whole system if all your big Photoshop files got uploaded here. So the math department has an FTP server set up for this type of file to be submitted. There's instructions linked to here in the assignment page. You'll be presented with instructions of this in a week module or in a module previous to when this is actually due. Below all of the instructions here is the rubric in another form. This is all the same content that was in the PDF that I just showed you. So I will be using this rubric to actually grade your project. I hope you have fun working on this self-portrait project. I'm looking forward to seeing what you create and learning more about you. Focus on the requirements outlined in the rubric and take notes as you go. Having those notes will make the write-up much easier. If you follow these tips, I know you will do great.